Thank you so much for joining us. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Chris Whittle, the incomparable entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Edison Schools. Let me go back. Whittle Communications, Edison Schools, Avenues, and now Whittle School and Studios, a truly new global school. Chris is also a board member of the Center for Education Reform, and a good friend. And we are so happy to grab you for a little while today during the U.S. Italia Ed Innovation Festival. I know that you and Ash and some people participating today probably just heard you have a conversation about that. You're traveling all over the world. We didn't have a chance to catch you up about this, but we have a group, a small but mighty COVID-approved group in Italy, and then several hundred around the country who have signed up for 3 days of this festival that was originally supposed to be in person. And next time you will be here. So let's just start. First of all, I want you to tell everybody, because you have a special Italian connection that I think is really important for people to know about.
Well, my wife grew up in Rome, just north of where you are, I think, and she's just opened her fourth photography show in New York. Her name's Priscilla Rattazzi, and she's part of the Agnelli family, and her mom was the first female foreign minister of Italy and one of Italy's great women.
I love it. It makes you even all the more impressive. So Chris, I think it would be great because there are so many people that are budding entrepreneurs, ed innovators of all sorts, investors, other people who, if they're not here today, they will be. Talk about your journey as an entrepreneur for the last 30 plus years. I mean, you know, the challenges that you had, what were they then? How are they different now? And what would you say to people who are looking for some wisdom and guidance?
You're being kind to me. My journey's actually been 50 years, Jeanne, and I discovered education reform as a junior in college when I was running for student body president, and I saw a conference in America that was on education reform, which was an idea I knew nothing about, and my bumper sticker in 1968 for that election read, "For a Better Education." And it was really the beginning of an idea that you could actually make schools better, and that they were not something that was just done to you, that you could actually improve upon them. And from that little seed really grew 4 enterprises over 50 years. Whittle Communications was primarily a media company that served colleges and universities and schools. And its best known product was one that was our first employee, was Anderson Cooper, who we created something called Channel One that reached 40% of American teenagers every morning. Think of it as really the CNN of kids, and it was on for 20 years in the 90s and the first part of this century. I then, with the president of Yale University, pioneered the charter school movement, and we opened the first 100 or so charter schools in 50 cities in the United States across a 15-year period. And that was when charters were not fashionable, as you well know, Jeanne, and it was quite controversial. And then I decided to do something easy, which was to do a top-tier private school in New York City. And along with Benno and Alan Greenberg, we launched Avenues, the World School, which today in New York has about 1,700 students. And it went on to open in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and also in Shenzhen, China. And then starting 5.5 years ago, I launched what will be my last endeavor, Whittle School and Studios, which is what we think of as the first global school, and we hope will be viewed as the first modern one as well. And we have campuses. We opened our first 2 major campuses in Shenzhen, China last year, and in Washington, D.C., and then we have campuses under construction in the western part of Shanghai, Suzhou, China, and in New York City, which will open next year.
You know, it's fascinating, and of course, I have known you since Edison, and a lot of people out there have read books by you, about you, news articles, et cetera, but I don't think anyone quite fully appreciates, I won't say anyone, I don't think everyone quite fully appreciates the extent to which, and you're modest, so you're not going to say this, you led the trail. And had a lot of arrows coming behind you. You started charter school movement, show people it can be done. People said it couldn't be. You did the same thing with Little Communications prior to that, and then subsequently, obviously, Avenues, and now Whittles School and Studios. So what do you say to people who go, God, I don't even know how you did it. Where do I even start?
You start by talking. I always say you start things by talking about them, and that that a lot of people want to keep their idea quiet and secret. And I've always gone, the best way to begin something is to start talking about it with everyone and get all of your friends and acquaintances involved, if you will, in the early conceptualization of an idea, and to see if it actually has legs and resonates with those that you know, and then from that action begins. But it first begins by talk and actually discussing what you're thinking about.
And you've also write it down. I know you write it down, you talk about it a lot, and you get other people to reflect on it, and then you just do it, right?
Pretty much.
Have you found it more challenging to create the idea or to fund the idea?
Well, if the idea is not strong, it is likely not going to be funded. And one of the entrepreneurial mechanisms that I've used is, at the same time that you're thinking about the substance of the idea, to also very early on begin to sketch the finances of the idea, and that you're actually working on the substance and the finances simultaneously. And I think one of the things that sometimes people make a mistake on is they work on the substance, but think of the financing as an afterthought. And I've always tried to do those simultaneously, if you will. And if you have a strong idea, and equally important, if you have a strong team, money will generally follow, and then comes execution, which is perhaps the most important of all.
And not to go too far off away from wanting to talk about Whittles School and Studios, but one more question about that. It also seems to me that you have been able to show a lot of us that grabbing and holding on to the idea itself, and not veering from that idea, even when a lot of people are out there saying, let's tone it down, or that's a little too big, that you've stuck on it. Is there a reason? Is that by nature entrepreneurial? Like, if you're young, maybe not so young, you're just a budding entrepreneur, what do they need to take away from the concept of the idea?
I have had really one idea that has been my raison d'etre for at least the past 30 years, and that is that a system of schools, a well-constructed system of schools, can do things that a single school cannot. And that idea throughout my 3 schooling ventures has been truly the idea I'm working on. And the way I like to think about it is that if you think of it as Mount Everest, I think I've gotten to Camp 1, to Camp 2, and to Camp 3, and never really summited yet. And so even though you may do it in different forms, in different company settings, um, I, I've found that that at least in my case, I've been working on one idea for 30 years in different ways.
It's a great way to put it. And this notion of a system of schools, of course, Edison inspired lots of other charter school management organizations, even some private school management organizations. So then you came kind of out of the US, if you will, and said, nope, the next idea has to be global. So why a global school?
If you think of a school as a place where students learn as much from the curriculum, if you will, as from the environment of the school itself. That they're watching everything, they're paying attention to everything. That the idea of a school that is designed to be globally connected and that functions as we like to say, one school with many campuses, that is actually a constant lesson for children throughout their 18 years with us, that the world is a connected place, that issues are global ones in many cases, not in all cases. And I think in the times that we live in, the idea of a global school is particularly important because with the rise of nationalism or the return of nationalism in many cases, the ability to cross borders and connect is going to be important. And another thing that I think we're doing within our system of global schools is we're finding out how do you actually navigate what should be global and what should be local? And in a way, that's a metaphor for what's going on in broader geopolitical settings as well.
Yeah, you know, it's really amazing too, that the concept, that global concept of education itself, the fact that, again, when we happen to be in a country that people don't pay too much attention to when it comes to education reform, innovation, technology, but yet we've been having conversations the last day and a half so far about so many of the similar challenges, and yet there are solutions building in both places, but they're not normally shared. And so my understanding from watching and kind of studying your example and in the building of Whittles School and Studios, Chris, is that you were grabbing ideas from everywhere. You were pulling in some of the top education innovators, leaders, architects, and people to sit down and say, from all these different places, what happens if we build a school together? Talk a little bit about the process of building that global school, like what made that unique from just someone starting a private school?
Well, one of the processes that we used is we looked and went to and talked to schools all over the world, and we also sourced everything all the components, if you will, of what we were doing from all over the world. Our architect for both our Washington campus and our Shenzhen campus is one of the great national treasures of Italy, Renzo Piano, and his work is brilliant, and the two schools that he has done for us in Shenzhen and Washington are going to be national treasures of those particular countries as well. All of our branding imagery was done by a terrific artist out of Spain. Our animation of that art was actually done out of Korea. In many of the things that we've done, we've looked all over the world and tried to incorporate best practices from schools and industry across the globe.
So what were the biggest challenges? Obviously, we know, many of us know what the challenges of COVID are, but kind of post-COVID, where do your schools stand? How are you dealing uniquely with the challenge presented back in March?
COVID was nothing short of a nightmare for us, and we're still coping with many of the results of that. First of all, just to give you one small example, our school in China was suspended during Chinese New Year because of COVID, and all of our families and all of our faculty were all over the world during Chinese New Year, and many hundreds could not get back to school. And so we were actually running a virtual school where a student that was originally supposed to be in Shenzhen with their teacher, the teacher might be in Berlin, and the
Wow.
student might be in Hokkaido with their parents because they couldn't get back to Shenzhen. So it was an operational nightmare for many, many months. We also had about 1.5 million square feet of construction underway in Suzhou, in Washington, and in New York City. All those construction projects were disrupted. We had 2 financing rounds that were supposed to close in March. Those were delayed and disrupted. We cannot get teams into China as quickly as we would like to for our launch of Suzhou. So I would say it's nothing that anyone would want to live through. Again, the good news is our almost 1,000 children and 300 staff members we've only had 1 reported case of COVID amongst them, so we're lucky in that regard. And if there was an upside of this tragic global event, and I'm sure most schools would say this, is it advanced schools' technological capabilities because they had to get smart very quickly on virtual learning, and I would say we're an example of that, and we were quite advanced in terms of technology within our campuses, but this became a way of going beyond the campuses, and it accelerated things we had planned.
Yeah, so does that mean Whittle School becomes also part digital in the future, or does that just mean that you're prepared for anything, or like is the upside being everything you just said, but what does that then look like in practice down the road?
Another thing I would say of the COVID crisis, it demonstrated, I think, conclusively something that I have long felt, is that parents and children and faculty deeply prefer a brick and mortar reality because of the coming together and really the heartbeat of a school. And that one of the things I think was demonstrated worldwide was you don't truly understand and appreciate something until it's gone. And when children and faculty and parents were not able to come together within physical school settings, it was something that was deeply missed, and not just because of the massive inconvenience that it caused families, but because of the warmth of a school that is difficult to replicate in a Zoom setting. So I think that has been a good thing, that it has demonstrated the importance of, if you will, old school in that particular respect. On the flip side of that, I think that it's shown schools how to do a variety of hybrid possibilities that will be both convenient for families in the future, and those are going to extend to weekends and evenings and summers. They're not going to replace, if you will, day school, but they're going to expand how school can be consumed. And I think in that regard, it was very helpful.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You say kind of preference for old school, but at the same time, why most parents who do choose outside of a pandemic online learning choose is because they're trying to get away from something that's old school in the bad way, right? That looks like the 150-year-old, factory model. Whereas in what you've designed, and yes, for everyone listening out there, I'm a huge fan, and have been since I first saw the design practically on the back of a napkin, maybe a little bit more sophisticated than that, Chris, but it's because you have people learning and doing and developing some of their own environment for learning, as well as great teaching all the time. And so I can see how that would be incredibly painful for the parent who invested and wanted their kids to be in that environment, whereas so many other places, right, are not as, as robust.
I understand.
So let me ask you a question about the extent to which you are, and this is actually a question from the audience, the extent to which you're planning to set up schools in other cities. Do you already have plans for other cities? And how are you thinking, and I think you kind of sort of just mentioned this, but maybe talk a little bit more about it, how you're thinking of leveraging technology to better enable your vision of this global system?
Yes, we are working in a half a dozen cities. And by the way, many of those have been delayed by about a year because of COVID, because construction could not commence, et cetera, et cetera. And our next city in China actually is Wuhan. And you can imagine the difficulties that we had over that particular stretch. But our next most active sites are Silicon Valley, Wuhan, Mumbai, and Delhi are the cities we are particularly interested in launching in India as soon as possible.
Nothing here in Italy?
In our early days, we are focusing on what would be viewed as mega cities. And interestingly, Europe is really best known for big cities, but not so much mega cities. And in 3 or 4 years, we're going to start introducing our typical campus is 2,500 students, and we're going to reduce that and have a model for cities that are of a slightly different scale. And that opens up a tremendous number of cities, particularly within Europe. And so Italy, one day, we hope to be in both Rome and Milan.
I see a lot of people in this room are smiling right now because they come from all over Bella Italia. So going back to that part of the question about the other part of the question about technology, Chris, and the last few minutes we have, and then kind of adding one of my own. So one of the things that we've been promoting, in fact, inspired me to do this event, was the notion as we work in rural North Carolina or inner city Ohio, or even in reservations of Native Americans in Arizona. The notion that content is so critical to kids, and inspiring interest in content, in knowledge comes from content, and that you could actually look out and see the Bay of Naples and Vesuvius on the left, for example, and explore the archaeological ruins that elaborate and show you not just science and art and history and geography, but invention. And I would always think like, wow, what if we could come together with people from different civilizations, different countries, in this case here, to start. And those kids could wake up through technology every day and be having a lesson just like this, where it's interacting. So not just a Zoom call, but maybe something where there's actually exposed. We had virtual reality, TV, et cetera, yesterday. So if you've got all of these schools building around the world, is there an opportunity to feed them to each other, to truly live in sister cities, if you will, and sister schools? Is that maybe one way, or are there other ways you're thinking of technology as a use that we should know about?
The idea that the schools are connected and working together is central to the idea itself. And that can be done in the way that you just said and is being done. By the way, with China and the U.S., you have time zone issues that that make live examples of that harder, but not impossible. It just means children are waking up a little earlier and going to bed a little later. So absolutely the connection, in many ways similar to what we're doing right now, we will do and are doing with schools, with our campuses. The other thing we're doing, every one of our campuses has dormitories. And the reason for that is during the course of a child's 15 years with us, we start at age 3 and go to age 18. They might spend one summer in Berlin, one summer in Delhi, a semester in Chengdu, and then a full year in Sao Paulo. And so we want it to be easy for students to do that. And then one last thing, you'll notice we have the name studios in the name of our school. It's school and studios. Studios is everything that's not part of the core school day. And we see much of that being hybrid in nature. A student might study with us from thousands of miles away via technology for the course of the year, but then come together in a capstone project at a campus in the summer. So hybrid solutions are something that we're really looking forward to.
Yeah, that's so important. I can't tell you how many times I remember thinking to myself once I got to college and then grad school, I wish someone had explained to me how to do a capstone project and I didn't have to look like an idiot asking how that works. So having that experience early on, I think it ties into a lot of the project-based work that's also kind of going on. So final reflections, what are we going to see, do you think, in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe zooming back from Whittles School and Studios and kind of looking at what you think based on your vantage of education in general? You obviously have following the news, you're seeing the struggles that schools are having, not just with opening, but challenges of teachers unions trying to stop them or getting in the way or denying kids access and challenges to traditional options and opportunities. The next 12 months, forget about national elections here or elsewhere, next 12 months for education. Are we coming out better, more informed? Do we have bigger fish to fry? What do you think?
Both, meaning we're coming out better and we're coming out worse. To start, unfortunately, on the worst side, COVID has been an incredibly expensive, tragic global event that is going to be felt in national budgets across the world, and it's going to impair education spending in millions of schools, public schools across the world. And so you're going to see budget damage for years within the public sector as a result of all the debt that has been taken on as a result of COVID. And that's, I think, just unavoidable. It happened after the great financial crisis, and you could see public spending flattening in many countries. On the flip side, and we've already said this a bit, I think that you're going to see much more advanced technological offerings as a result of COVID, both from existing tech providers who learned a lot during this crisis, but also from schools themselves who are have seen the possibilities that they did not see. And I would say, from my vantage point, and then the third thing, study abroad, at least for a year or two, is going to be damaged until visa situations open back up, families become comfortable with travel again. And so I think there will be a negative impact at both the university and high school level there.
which means people are probably looking for more kind of global schools from there. Any other words of wisdom you want to leave us to? You've been so generous with your time. I'm sorry we went over a little bit.
Enjoy the food, okay? And and wish I could be there with you, Jeannie. And thank you for everything you have done for so many years in being a change agent in education within America and now globally. And every one of us appreciate it. And to a good conference there.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.